All right. Hello, Dr. Danielle Lord and Michonne Garamani coming at you today with Emotional Empowerment Workshop number 4. Welcome back to the podcast, The Compassion Project, and we're happy to be with you today again. And we're going to be talking about resilience, and there's a lot to unpack in this conversation. So, Michonne, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us kicked off and started.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for everybody joining us and joining in. I'm already having technical difficulty. What just happened? Hold on a minute. All right, there we go.
Someone told me his best views were the ones that had all the glitches in it. So embrace them.
Maybe it will be. Resilience. And here we are being resilient right out of the gate. How do we solve our problems, right? Yeah. So resilience is an interesting thing that I think culturally we sideline, but it exists, and it is a factor in our world that doesn't get a tremendous amount of attention, but is a factor of healthy living. A massive amount of our lives is spent trying to regain a sense of control, a regain of an emotional well-being, as what we are discussing in all of this series, right? This emotional empowerment. So resilience is a massive factor here. But what we're going to discuss today is definition and the questions that relate to then what it is, or how do we build it? How do we cultivate it? What do we do when it is kind of taking a back seat? Those kinds of things. So this definition that I have written down here is for my own, right? The ability to cope with, adapt, and bounce back. So that's my definition, the ability to cope, adapt, and bounce back. So the definition I make use of is got some of these features within it. The overcoming adversity, right? Mental and emotional flexibility. This is a big one. And this one is really taught very early, primarily in a family unit or your primary home unit. And this is highly influential by peer groups, right? This mental and emotional flexibility. This is learned very, very early on a very subconscious level as young children are adapting and taking in a social environment in their dwelling. And whether or not the flexibility exists in the home for people to be individual, right? Can you be you even at a very young age, right? This flexibility. And this is taught very just like very what's the opposite of overt? Like it's covert, right? It's very covert in family dynamics, and not a lot of people will be an educator in their family unit directly to create teaching on flexibility. But I think it's a really important one. Bouncing back. Well, how does one bounce back, right? It's like, how long do I stay stuck? How long do I stay mad? How long do I whatever? But I'm going to say that the bouncing back moves us from perhaps a title of negativity into a space of positivity, or a state of inaction to a state of action. And I want to be cautious here. There's no wrong or right of us existing in a state of inaction or inflexibility. This isn't a judgment of right or wrong. This is just a knowing of our own self and how we process where we might need adaptations and improvements. Improvements are very individual. Yeah. Danielle, anything to share or say about those topics?
Yeah, I think about this mental and emotional flexibility and what you were speaking about, learned behaviors in the home, and the value, power, beauty of embracing the different personality styles that we all have. Even our kids, at very early ages, you can begin to see some of the different personality traits. If you've ever had a child, a baby, you can see them pretty quickly. I think especially if you understand different personality styles. And I reflect back to a gal I knew who had a son who was very different from her. And she was completely unable to cope with his differences because it wasn't what she expected, right? Or how she behaved. And so she expected this child to behave in the same manner, but he had a very different personality style. And she had him on Ritalin, had him diagnosed as ADHD, whatever, and on Ritalin at a very early age. And I thought, oh my gosh, I tried so hard to explain to her different personality styles, but she just wasn't having
Yeah.
anything to do with it. But I always found that really, really sad and tragic that someone would put their child on a medication rather than trying to understand and embrace those differences.
Interesting. Right. And what you just illustrated is how somebody can be not, I don't know if it's unwilling. I don't know this person, but an inflexibility that has such incredible consequences.
Yeah. Well, and I
And
think it spoke a lot to her inability to be resilient, right?
right, in the face of adversity, in the face of challenge or change. Now, one thing I would like to just put out there, and everybody, I please, I would love to meet the person that doesn't have this happen. Life has changed. Where is that person that
Yeah.
hasn't experienced change and the need to adapt? I mean, my my current modern 50-year-old Mashawn is a very different individual than my 20-year-old version, right? And the adaptations that I've had to make in both relationships or my body choices, food choices, all these kinds of things. This is part of the resilience umbrella, right? Us being able to move forward in our lives, adapting to really what is. This goes back to the mental part of this number two up here. Mental flexibility is there's some acceptance of what is. In your example of your friend, there is my immediate pushback is I'm wondering how much acceptance there is there that doesn't then yield resilience or flexibility. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And just how interesting that that plays into our family dynamics and certainly shows up in work dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So just different ways that the mental flexibility shows up in allowing differences. Allowing differences. We're
Mm-hmm.
different and there's
Mm-hmm.
change. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bouncing back, how resilient can we be after being probably negatively impacted? Most of us don't think we bounce back after positive experiences. We just call that a great moment and we call it growth, right? Enduring can have, again, some of these have more negative, more of a negative overtone to them, but we can endure. And I want to say I've endured many different things, and endured isn't just suffering, by the way. It's not, it can, and sometimes it does, but enduring can also include a faith or a faith-based element to it that things will be better. It's just a matter of time. And that's the component of the resilience, right? That faith-based, it will be with enough time and change or intervention, things will be different. Moving down a little bit more, we've got coping, ability, right? And each one of us have different abilities. And in a future workshop, we're going to talk about the differences of abilities based on capability differences and capacity differences. And that factors into resilience a little bit as well. Moving down a little bit more, we've got survival tactics. Some of this is innate, right? Even babies have survival tactics. We have an innate nervous system that operates on reflexes, gag reflex, things like this, right? Knee jerk, hand jerk, eyes closing is a learned behavior, right? So we have these survival tactics that play into our resilience of protection. But we can also learn survival tactics as well, right? How to use my words, and my words are powerful to direct a conversation or move myself out of conflict verbally, right? These are survival tactics. It's not always just, do I have my backpack packed with a knife and a tarp?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that. It could be,
Mm-hmm.
but most of us aren't in that dynamic every day, right? Most of us are on the front lines of our home and our interactions with our children that we're having disagreements with, or a spouse, or a work, or a coworker. So we need survival, maybe even a survival backpack there, right? What kind of tools are in there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Are you okay if we advance to the next slide?
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. Okay, here we go. This is where we will list a few questions here, and we will then discuss these kind of going in order. So one of the things to ask is resilience a human trait only? And I have a conclusion that the answer is no. Danielle, what do you think?
I would agree with that. I mean, for anyone who has spent any time gardening or out in the yard where you find a dandelion growing out of a rock, the crack in a rock, or the crack in a sidewalk, or wow, I had that planted last year. I guess I dropped a seed and here it is. It's become an entirely new cucumber plant or whatever the case is. So I think that plants and animals alike are very, very resilient. And I think the difference is there's nothing telling them no. There's nothing that says, oh, you can't do that or you can't be this way. They're going off just the purely reptilian brain. I guess maybe plants don't even have a reptilian brain. There's some genetic encoding in that seed that says my only role is to grow and flourish. And so,
Yeah,
yeah, I'd go back to
beautifully said.
no one telling them no. So,
Wow, that's really wonderful. Right. And that resilience is cultivated. Can you even imagine what kind of resilience can be cultivated? What kind of empowerment in a setting of not being told no? Now, obviously, certain no's are needed in life, right? I mean, we have
yeah,
parameters, right? But
don't
I
put
think
your
most
hand
of us
on the hot
here,
burner.
right, we do understand what you're suggesting. Um, and I think that that goes to a question of attitude,
Yeah.
attitude of how we are looking at our lives and what we want, what kind of room we want for progress or a movement forward. So I agree. Resilience is not a human trait. We see this in the world, plants and other animals. All right. Can a resilience erode or be taken away? Definitely. Yes. And as much as we believe it to be a cultivated idea, as if it can be cultivated, then it can be eroded or it can just remain, right? There's varying degrees. Danielle,
Yeah.
you have something to share here?
Yeah, but then what about how do we rebuild it? If we are in a situation where we're born with this innate sense of resiliency, and that innate sense gets eroded over time by being told no, by being told you're not good enough, by being told your personality and mine don't mesh, so I'm going to put you on medication. How do we rebuild it over time? And I think that only comes through the amount of change that we experience, because every time we experience a change, or as Dr. William Bridges calls it, a transition, that is something that we can repack our toolkit with, and we can recreate that grit and that sense of resiliency as we go through some of those life's changes. So it's a much bigger question that we could probably spend way more time talking about, but in the interest of
Yeah,
time, yeah,
yeah,
I think we have to recognize though that maybe we get to a point of young adulthood where it has been eroded over time, and so what do I do now in order to repack that toolkit, rebuild that toolkit?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot of dynamics that go into the factor of what can erode it, but just as equal, there's a lot of factors that can go to build it. We're going to get to that on the next slide a little bit. So we'll just we'll just reserve that answer for just a moment. Um, Going back into this kind of this slide with these questions, the next one is, what does your definition of resilience teach you about how you understand adversity? So I want to make this personal. So put the word your in here, right? This is my definition about my adversity. What does it teach you? What does it teach me? Right? So about adversity, about conflict, unrest, trauma, and even the recovery, the healing side of that.
Mhm.
So when I look at my definition of excuse me, of resilience, which I noted is my ability to cope, adapt, and bounce back. So I look at that as again, that using that word flexible, right? It's both a mindset and a heart space. They coexist. And this flexibility of me actually having decisions about how long I intend to stay in my current state. I actually think about that quite often. When I feel aggravated or a sense of distrust, distress, or I've had a very difficult conversation with someone and I'm really feeling down about it, I have taken initiatives to say, okay, for the next 5 minutes, I'm just going to sit right here, emotionally sit. I'm going to stay with this. I'm going to experience it because it is truly my existence right now.
Hmm.
I am not going to cast judgment such as, why do you feel that way? Or you shouldn't feel that way. I reserve the judgment and just exist and be in it. And that's the embodiment of resilience that I'm hoping that by the end of this entire series of emotional empowerment series, that people have a takeaway of. So I collectively have chosen it's kind of to use time. I'm going to do this for 5 minutes. I'm going to sit here. And at the end of 5 minutes, I'm going to stop crying.
Yeah.
Or at the end of 5 minutes, I'm going to reevaluate. Do I need a little bit more time? But I'm not going to deny myself the experience of really what is true. Now, I will tell this story or a fragment of a story. This is difficult to do in the workforce because I have a task to be due. I have people waiting on my presentation. I have the meeting I need to show up for, and my boss just chewed me out. And can I actually just exist in the moment? And it's a hard thing to do, but I think this ties back to the culture, this idea of a culture, moving down into the very last question here on this slide about community and society. It's a cultural thing where we, I think, fail culturally to allow people to have their human experience in their own unique human way and to be able to allow time for that. Now, Danielle, I'm pretty sure you can speak to this.
Oh gosh, there is so much that
Yeah,
came up in this whole what you were just talking about. I think for me, the definition of resilience for me has changed over the course of the year. You know, a year
yeah,
ago, I might have said resilience is that ability to bounce back. And you know, just maybe compartmentalize something in the moment. But now I've kind of had this shift in my head around, I think the ability to be resilient is to forgive yourself and to let go of the things. And this has come up in previous conversations, Michonne, with you and I around the a unique emotional experience that you're having at a particular point in time, right?
yeah,
And going back to it and saying, oh, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, previous
yeah,
conversation, and just and let it go and forgive yourself. And that's kind of where I'm coming at it today at this point in time, is that really
yeah,
ability to forgive ourselves. And I think that we can overcome adversity in a much different way. But I also really appreciated what you said about recognizing it. That's part of great emotional intelligence, right? Is to first
yeah,
recognize and be comfortable with your own emotions, and
yeah,
to say, I'm going to give myself 30 minutes. I'm going to allow myself, well, when I was 20, I would allow myself to eat a quart of ice cream. I can't do that now. But when this quart of ice
change
cream,
our tactic.
I'm going to draw the line in the sand and be okay with it.
Yeah,
But I think definitely
yeah,
taking some time and saying, okay, I'm going to allow myself 30 minutes, and then I'm going to pick
yeah,
up and move forward. And I think
yeah,
that that is something that we oftentimes don't allow for in the organization, in the
yes,
workplace.
yeah,
Certainly, I think we're
right,
seeing it with, you know, kind of quiet rooms that people are putting into offices. The office space is kind of just a space for you to go and have a little bit of decompression time. So, and I think we're certainly
mm.
starting to see it a little bit, be a little bit more culturally accepted in the workplace.
Well, I think this was what I have had my in my own experience is that there is this overtone that a work culture is separate from the people. It's not.
No, no, the
And
people are,
this division is the problem
yeah,
because, you know, how many times in a work culture it's don't bring your personal here to the office
right.
and then vice versa, don't bring work home, right?
Yeah.
But I am me in both places. I can wear different hats and I can, you know, take on different roles. Yes. Um, but we are just not that compartmentalized.
No,
And
no, we're not. And we
nor
don't
do
want
I
to
think,
be.
yeah,
I,
yeah, nor do I think it actually is a healthy way of addressing and looking at what we actually need in the moment of our distress or stress or the pressures that be. I have home pressures, and then I come to work and I have work pressures, and they commingle, they coexist. So to talk
Absolutely.
about it is to acknowledge it, and to actually then create a culture in a workspace that can afford that unique need that one may have. And everybody would be being different, and to acknowledge that it exists, and to have room for it. Have room for it is what we need. And that's a culture of compassion. It's different than to say, oh, we just we're gonna baby you. That's it's nothing
Yeah,
babying
right.
about caring for
Human
myself,
kindness.
because actually I will be a better employee if I can address some of these things in the moment and deal with them. I can then experience something and then be a better employee, be more focused, better and dedicated. So I think there is something to say that it serves it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. I would agree 100%. I think we see a lot better productivity, output, team relationships, team dynamics when we allow people to be their full selves. You're not having to
yeah,
create a different persona for yourself just in order to come to work and survive.
yeah, right. And resilience is not only an individual thing, because we build a factor of ourselves in a community within our family. That's our first community, first of all. No matter how many people are in that, it's small, it can be a small community, it still is. And then maybe you might think community is like your direct neighborhood, left and right neighbor, and maybe your church community, or maybe your affiliation with a group, or somewhere out in public, you meet for a book club, right? And then there's society at large. But I think that um, to look at how we fit and how individuals collectively come together to build these things. And what kind of world, I love to dream, what kind of world could we have if we had a compassionate position to an innate reality that we each have these emotional distresses. How much would really be different about our culture,
Yeah.
and certainly warfare, big time warfare, right? Yeah. All right, I'm going to move on to the last slide. Here we go. How does your definition of resilience inform your approach toward emotional empowerment and healing? Interesting question. So just some think time for our audience here. Well, Danielle, please
Yeah,
share.
I go back to that idea of just letting go of things that you could have, would have, should have in the past, and the responses that you had, and having that degree of self-forgiveness. I think that goes a long way in this idea of emotional empowerment and healing. So that's kind of where I'm at. Same answer
Yeah.
to a different question.
Right, right. And it informs my approach, because when I am in distress, if I know I can move into states of distress or a deficiency in my ability to respond kindly. I mean, I know these things. I know how to be mean. I know how to do that. But I choose
It's a
to
choice. Yeah.
I do. It really is. And it's a
Yeah.
cultivation. No, none of this work, this is work, my friends. None of this work is an overnight thing. It's just not. This is a tried and true experience that one will journey through. So I offer myself a tremendous amount of compassion as I'm struggling in my own states. And when I see my spouse in distress, I say, I've gotten good at of saying it in this way. I'd love to hear about what's on your heart, only if you want to share.
Right.
I am
Oh,
here for
yeah.
you, but only when you're ready to, only if you want to share. You may never ever want to disclose that to me. And you know what? That's room in my relationship for that. But I want someone to know that I'm here for you. And we've cultivated to a point where my husband returns that same sort of favor. Like, we're giving each other room to improve or share through community and connection there, to build up our trust. That's another factor of resilience,
Mhm.
right? But it's with permission. I give you permission that when you're ready, I'm here for you. I'm all in. I hope we can return the favor, and to cultivate that space. So that is how it informs my approach toward emotional empowerment. I offer it to myself and I offer it to others.
I think that's such an important point that you bring up, Michonne, is that this has got to be reciprocal, right? This
Yeah,
is not a one-way thing. I think
yeah,
back to someone that I know who was, I think, in her heart, really trying to show compassion to her spouse, but it came in the form of demands. You've
no,
got to stop doing this. You need to start doing this, and did a very structured, rigid, you must start, you must stop this. And I remember, trying to have the conversation with her about, demands is not going to help
yeah,
when your spouse is in an already difficult situation. You're just adding
right,
more to their plate, right?
yeah,
By putting forth
right.
emotional demands that he
Well,
might not
and
be able to meet.
exactly. That speaks to what we're going to address in our next workshop, which has to do with capabilities and capacities.
Mm-hmm.
And
Nice.
that kind of statement also refers back to our lesson 3, which is on shoulda, or maybe 2, shoulda, woulda, couldas. Like you could have done it differently, but and it's just
Yeah.
it's antagonistic, and it's actually not inviting. And remember, everything about what we've discussed is always in an effort for connection so that I understand myself, connections and time and room that I have, and so that I can move into connection to myself, but connection with others. Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is the work. This is a work. It's a process.
Oh, yeah.
Takes time. Takes
And
time.
think back to the focus moment that we read when we started this series, right?
Yeah.
With the cathedral. How many hundreds of
Yeah.
years did it take to build that? So I think we have to
Yeah.
embrace that same idea. But thinking about this, the next question, how does your definition of resilience influence your day-to-day work, living, interactions, speech, intent, beliefs, values, biases, and more? I think back, you had mentioned your 20-year-old self. I
Yeah.
think at my 20-year-old self, I might have had a bad day. And so I chose to be mean to somebody and, kind of patted myself on the back for it. It was like, all right, I got back at
Oh
you.
yeah.
Don't
Yeah,
know
I got
you,
you.
but I got back at you. I
Yeah.
expressed my anxiety and frustration and angst by being mean to you. And I was okay with that. Right. I think today, my 57-year-old self now, I go, oh my gosh, I could have done so much better. I
Yeah.
allowed myself to sink into a space of anger outwardly expressed to somebody else, and I can do better than that. I didn't use should
Right.
have done. It should have done. I think I can do better than that. I can be
I can do
better
better.
than
And
that
that's forward
person.
thinking.
Yeah.
That's the future thinking, not the reverse thinking, right? Not going into the past and a woe me, it could have what was wrong with me. Here's what I want to make sure that I don't know that I've communicated here clearly, but there's nothing wrong with us, even when we do it wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
We are
Yep.
all on a journey and we have
Yeah.
all practicing these things. And this is my 1000th time of practice. And maybe it's a little shorter that I get it together. But you know what, my friends? That's progress.
That's resilience.
That's resilience.
That is
Yeah.
resilience. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is always a striving effort. I'd like to put that word out to the community. If you wanted to add any comments down below for this particular idea of striving, this resilience idea is an effort of striving, and it's not. There's no word here for perfect. Nope, not about perfect, not about perfection. It's even not. Did you get it right? It's about, is it perhaps in your own sense, a critique of, is it a little bit better than last time? But that's a very personal critique, right? And that resilience is what shows up when we can move through things gentler, like I'm gentler on myself.
Mm-hmm.
I offer an
Mm-hmm.
extension of a little more time for you in your change, in the change that you are undergoing, right? This is the resilience that we can offer both ourselves and to others. So that is the conclusion of our discussion. If you have any other things to share, Danielle, that would be fine.
Just a couple things on the last slide, Michonne.
Yeah.
Um, if you want to go ahead and advance the slide. I'm sorry, the neighbor's
Oh,
dog
yes.
is
I'm
out
sorry.
and
Yes.
running around my yard. So I'm kind of having a squirrel moment myself here as I'm worrying about my yard art out there. But I think one thing that's important to think about as we consider how to build our resiliency is that it's not something we can teach you necessarily. It's something that you have to kind of embrace and adopt and say, this is
Experience.
a path forward that I want to take. So just a couple of quick factors to take into consideration when we think about building our own resiliency is recognizing that when we go into stress, we're in our shadow side. And that's any one of us. And so when we do have those moments of, oh my gosh, my world is falling apart, the walls are crumbling, we're not going to show up as our best. And so I think we have to show some grace and space for people, even ourselves, who are going through those moments of complete stress and anxiety, and realize that that is not truly who they are.
Yeah.
Reframing the story that's occurring in our own head. So getting out of this threat response and starting to rethink it as a challenge. How can I challenge myself to move beyond this? And maybe it's my spouse is cranky and crabby, and so I'm just going to allow him the space to be cranky and crabby and walk away from him for a minute and let him just be in that space for a minute. Remember that we grow when we're in a state of eustress. Michonne has it on the slide deck there. It is spelled EUSTRESS.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is a little different from stress or distress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Based
It's a healthy stress.
growth.
It's a
And
growth
then
stress.
remember, one of the best ways that we can all create a sense of resiliency is to have the daily dose. So DOSE is an acronym that stands for dopamine, oxytocin, not Oxycontin, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And these are really powerful neurochemicals that our brain produces. They're called the happiness chemicals. And in the absence or lack of these chemical responses, it actually can mimic depression. And so if we're not getting it from the external world, how do we make sure that we get it ourselves, or we provide the daily dose for ourselves? And as we're thinking about that, we want to stay away from fake dopamine, and we want to get real dopamine. So an example of fake dopamine would be, oh, unneeded shopping. Oh, I don't need to hear that. I'm going to ignore that one. Mindless scrolling through your Facebook posts, all night gaming, overconsumption of coffee or alcohol, binge watching TV, gossiping. Those are all examples of fake, or what we call short-term dopamine responses, versus the real dopamine responses, like, which is a heart-to-heart hug with someone, right? I think what, 6 seconds or
6-second hug. Yeah.
eye contact, deep
Yeah.
breathing or square breathing, being out with friends, prayer, meditation, music, art, or something that is very creative. So making sure that if no one else is giving you the daily dose, make sure that you're giving it to yourself. So
yeah. Sunlight is a factor here as it
yeah.
as it cultivates other elements in the body to
Yes.
affect the mind.
Yep.
Nature is a big one. And then I would say for me as a personal element is me tuning into a hobby that I really enjoy that allows my mind to rest. And
Yes. Yeah.
I don't sit in a state of worry or rest, or I don't even replay a bad conversation that just happened. I just move into this hobby space and it fills me.
Yeah.
Like, puts you into a new state of being. So whatever that could be for you, how to build your resiliency is an important factor. And collectively, this series of recordings are in an effort to help you evaluate where your position is, understand how you may be responding to others, because we are only in charge of ourselves.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We can make asks and requests upon others, but there is never a guarantee of that change. We change this person and this person only. And so doing these things are collectively are going to build your resilience. Now, at the end of this entire series, there's a really long list that we will present and have a deep dive discussion on. Danielle has done a great job here of listing a few and giving you some insight as to what may be a fake element of the dopamine dose versus the real. But take time to examine what may sit within you that really feels authentically joyous. What have you done in the past that does build and put a smile on your face. So those are the things to consider for helping to build your resilience. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time today. And there's going to be additional series of these recordings in the series. So keep an eye out for those going forward. And thank you. If you're new to our channel, please like and subscribe. And we welcome any of your comments and or even questions
Please.
in the comments below. And we will get back to you. Yeah. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Michonne. Talk to you
Thank
soon.
you.